Many foreign language students can develop a great sense of confidence when they're able to finally understand the oversimplified language used in certain course material that they're using to study, whether it be from the How to Learn a Language audio CD to the extremely modified language of certain podcasts out there. They'll develop this sense of confidence and feel great that they're able to understand something. Now, what can happen then is that this confidence that they feel can come crashing down when they're put in a real life situation in which they're faced with a native speaker and they can't understand what the native speaker is saying, or they're simply trying to watch a television program in the language and they have no idea what's going on in the television program. It's like they can barely understand a word of what's happening. Then they'll feel very frustrated and very discouraged and wonder, why are my listening comprehension skills so low? Why can't I understand? And this can start to create the question of, well, what can I do to improve? How can I improve my listening comprehension skills? And I watch a lot of people rack their brain over this, like really trying to figure it out. What technique should I use? What method should I use? How many hours per day, or how many minutes per day, or when should I listen? What should I listen to? And they really try to figure this out. And I have the answer for this. It's actually a very simple answer. To improve your listening comprehension skills in the language, you need to listen a lot. Listen a lot. Listen to things that you're interested in. Listen to things that mean something to you. Listen to things that you care about. Listen to things that are educational to you, that are uplifting, that are motivational, inspirational. But all in all, you need to listen a lot. Not only do you need to listen to things that you're interested in, but you also need to listen to things that you can somewhat understand. If you're listening to material that's too difficult, you'll feel extremely frustrated. You won't understand. And you're more likely to give up then. If you listen to something that's too easy, you're going to get bored. Now, there's this debate going on about whether or not it's important to listen to things that you don't understand at all. For example, passive listening, where you would be listening to the radio or listening to or watching a TV program in the language while doing household, chores, or while cleaning and things like that. A lot of people say that doing this passive listening is an extremely ineffective way to improve your listening comprehension in a language. And while I don't think it's the most effective way, I do think that it serves its purpose. And I think that the purpose is that once you're listening to things in the background, in that language that you want to learn, your brain starts to become extremely accustomed to the sounds, the intonations, the rhythm, and the patterns of that language, even though you're not aware of it. You have to remember that you're not always consciously aware of what your brain is doing and how you're learning. So, although listening to the radio in the background or listening to a podcast in the background at full native speed and with native speakers isn't going to help you understand, or if it does, it would take a very long time. It is helping you in that way, in pardon me, in beginning to understand those intonations, the rhythm, and that sort of thing. And the other way in which it's helpful is because it will start to get you into the habit of listening to things in that language. Oftentimes, when we have free time, even though we're learning another language, we're watching TV in English, or we're watching certain things in English, or listening to certain things in English. Why? Because it's comfortable for us, but or whatever your native language is. But by listening to things, even if you don't understand them in another language in the background while you're doing other things, you start to get into the habit of listening in that language. So that's another way in which passive listening, as it were, could be helpful for you. Now, going back to what I said before, a lot of people get so frustrated and think, well, how come I can't understand? And what's wrong with me? And why is my listening comprehension so low? But these people only, not everyone who feels this way, but just for an example, these people only listen to things in the language maybe 2 hours a week if you count it all up. From podcasts for learners and YouTube videos for learners and things like that, or an audio CD that came with a language book that they're using. When you add it all up, sometimes maybe it's only 2 hours per week, if that. And you're gonna get out of it what you put into it. You can't put in 2 hours a week and then wonder, why can't I understand? You have to be listening as much as possible in the language. 2 hours a week isn't gonna cut it. I like to think of language learning and listening comprehension in particular as a retirement fund. And I know you guys are like, what is she talking about? But let me explain. If you think about a retirement fund, let's say you are 19 years old and you start putting money into a retirement fund, and with a compounded interest and all of that. Once you get to the age of 70, you've grown an extremely great amount of money. Now, let's say you started to put the money in when you were 60, and by the time you're 70, the money that you have in there isn't so great. And it's the same thing. And this is not to discourage you and to say that if you're a certain age, pardon the noise, that if you're a certain age, you won't be able to get to a native like level, or you won't be able to be advanced. That's not to say that at all, because that's simply not true. But the point of that is that time is what matters. It's time. You need to put the time into it. Um, Native speakers aren't any more gifted than we are. They're not any more special than we are. They have had a lot of time in the language. Time is what matters. That's what they've had. They've had this language coming at them for years and years and years nonstop. And so when you think about that, when you think about how much a native speaker has been, surrounded by this language in terms of hearing it, and then when you compare that with, a 2 hour per week listening to a podcast or listening to, that's not going to cut it. You have to really listen a lot, as much as you can. um, and when it comes to native speakers, again, I don't want to say this to discourage you and to make you feel like I'll never reach that level, because there are lots of people who in their adulthood have reached a native like level, and I believe it's extremely possible. For the majority of us, I feel like it's very possible if we put that effort into just listening and surrounding ourselves and immersing ourselves in the language. To be honest, when I'm around native speakers in Spanish, which is my strongest foreign language, I'm learning two others at the moment, but both at a beginner level. When I'm around native speakers, and having conversations in Spanish, I don't feel like I'm any different from them. And it's funny, it's not because I'm delusional, it's not because I, have this false sense of pride or whatever. A way for me to feel more confident, and a way for me to not take the role of a learner. Because what can happen is that sometimes if you feel like you're just a learner and not a native speaker, you feel like you're less than. You feel like you don't have the right to listen to certain shows, or you don't have the right to be around native speakers speaking at full speed, because you're just a learner. I don't like to think of myself as just a learner. To me, I'm one of them. I'm just like them. And again, I know that I know that my first language is English, but I put myself in that mindset to help me with that, so that I can have a better sense of confidence and a stronger sense of, you know, yeah, a stronger sense of confidence when I'm using the language, so that I don't feel like just something. Now, at the beginning, when you first start learning a language, it's up to you. It's up to you what method you want to use. But if you prefer to have certain explanations in English, then it's okay. You do what you like to do, and do what makes you comfortable. You can start by watching things that have explanations in English, so that you can get um, a certain amount of vocabulary and a certain basis in the language, so that you feel comfortable. And then from that, I would go on to listening to things that are designed for children in that language. um, I would stay away from, that's me personally, I like to stay away from things that are designed for learners. I like to go straight for things that are designed for native speakers. So if I'm beginning in a language, that means a lot of children's programs. Now, if you don't like children's programs, if you can't stand them, that's a separate issue. But if you're fine with that, then I highly recommend that. The language in the children's programs is oversimplified, but not because the difference between the oversimplification of the language in children's programs for native speakers and the oversimplification of language in podcasts and things like that for learners is that in the children's programs, they don't assume that the children are not going to understand what they're saying, even though they might use certain words that the children won't understand. In the things for the in the material for the learners, they do have the assumption that the people listening, that their audience is not going to understand everything, so they feel the need to back it up with lots of English explanations, which I find extremely unhelpful. Because then that gets me into the mindset of using my English as a crutch to learn the other language. So I stay away from that, and put your energy more into finding things that are meant for native speakers. So, like I said in the beginning, that would mean a lot of children's material, because that would be what you would be able to understand at that beginner level. Another thing, now, if English is your I'm sorry, if learning foreign languages is your hobby, then that's fine, and I'm not talking to you. But if it's not, if you're very passionate about it and it's something that's, you're doing for either personal reasons or for career advancements, and you're very serious about it, I would watch the amount of time that you spend talking about the language. What I mean by this is, a lot of people like to go in forums and do things like that, talking about the language. That time that you're spending talking about the language, like, oh, I'm learning this language, I'm learning that language, um, big truck. I'm learning this language or that language, and I'm using this method and that method, and an X person on YouTube uses this technique and this method. That time that you're spending talking about the language, you can be spending immersed in the language. I don't talk about the fact that I learned Spanish other than these videos that I do, in which I'm trying to help you, because it's irrelevant. I don't have to go around talking about the fact that I'm learning Spanish and about the best way that I learned Spanish, and just the same way, I don't walk around talking about the fact that I'm a native English speaker. I just am. I just speak English. Just the same way, I just speak Spanish. It just happens. I don't need to talk about it. Time is precious. So, watch the amount of time that you spend doing that sort of thing. You could be immersed in the language rather than talking about the language. So I hope you found this video helpful. Remember, if you ever have any questions, feel free to leave them in the video or leave a comment on my channel page. I'm actually still in the process of writing articles and writing material for my blog/website that I'm going to open shortly. I hope it's sooner than later. And I'm constantly writing things and then documenting what I'm doing and how I'm learning and what I've noticed, my observations and things of that nature. I hope to do more research on these things in the future. I am studying linguistics, and I am going to be getting a master's in linguistics. Right now I'm getting a bachelor's in linguistics, a second bachelor's, and I'm going to move on to get a master's and hopefully a PhD. So I'm trying to amass a great amount of material and writing things and that thing. I'd love to do more research on some of the things that I'm observing. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'd love to do a video on it if I have something to contribute to your question, if I have an answer, if I have something to say. I'd love to do a video on it. And if you have any other comments or anything like that, please feel free. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. I'd love for you to subscribe and follow my journey here. And yeah, that's it. I will speak to you guys soon. Have a great day. Bye.